Welcome to Cassette Culture Season 2. In this season, we're digging into the very origins of the UK cassette culture in the idealism of late 70s punk. As well as the voices of the artists, you'll hear me, Martin Franklin, and Jerry Kranitz. Cassette culture.
I think where we were, it's kind of a lump of land that sticks out into the North Sea. So it's very removed from the main sort of area of the country, I think. And so for that reason, there wasn't a lot of culture, if you want to call it that, around. You know, the big bands never came to that area to play. At the end of 1976, start of 77. So really at the point where punk was happening and everything was sort of taking off. So it was a very fertile period. We were never a punk band, but we were certainly inspired by that ethos of, get out there, do it yourself. Don't worry about learning to play the instruments and things like that. That will come later.
Lucky's no one special to thank. Daydreaming people living on the coast. Things to look round for like a burning of the
toast. That's the voice of Mark Lancaster. He and his friend, known as Protag, formed their band, the Instant Automatons, right after leaving school. Here's how musician and Integrated Circuit Records founder Colin Potter remembers them.
But then when the punk thing started and it became possible to do things yourself, cassettes became a very easy and cheap medium. But for me, one of the biggest, I would say, perhaps inspirations was the guys who were the Instant Automatons. I think that was the first time I saw the idea of send us a blank cassette, we'll record our music on it and send it back to you for nothing other than the cost of the postage. Or send us your music on a cassette and we'll send you our music on a cassette, which as a methodology I'd never come across before. It just seemed like a great idea. They did various compilations with lots of people from that era on it. And that, in a way, then connected. People started connecting with each other.
Protag was an electronics wizard, and he made his first bass guitar out of a set of floorboards and some bicycle brake cables for the strings, which was a really bad idea because bicycle brake cables are really rough and they kind of shred your fingers. But he also, he even went as far as to actually wind his own pickups. So make his own pickups, wind them, the copper wire around them and stuff like that. And so he did that, certainly. He built a synthesizer that we used, which was a Transcendent 2000. It's quite a famous DIY type synthesizer of the time, because at that time, synthesizers were ridiculously expensive to buy, certainly way out of our budget. So it was a case of needs must, really, if we wanted this stuff. But he got this Transcendent 2000 kit, put it together, made it work. He got a mixer kit again and built that as well. I have this old guitar which I bought from a junk shop. It was a Woolworths Top 20 guitar. It was a pretty horrible guitar, but I drilled a couple of extra holes in the headstock of my Woolworths Top 20 and added a couple of extra strings to that to make the 8-string guitar. And we did actually use that on a couple of the tracks that we recorded.
Rather poor register, which would, for example, have precluded their use in a hotel. These reports make it Toby King quite right and point out when the bar wants to know what he's done.
So at that point, that sort of model of how the cassette scene, started exchanging information hadn't quite evolved.
No, that's right. No. It's it's one of those things that kind of grew organically. There wasn't any kind of network around at that time. We're talking here about 1977, and so we thought, well, how are we going to get this music out there? And the obvious answer was to put it out as cassette. And because we wanted to have that control, we thought, well, we'll create our own label. The name, an obvious pun, Deleted Records. And that's how it happened, really.
The cassette network, which later bloomed during the 80s, had yet to happen by 1977. The Automatons were just working it out as they went along. But 200 miles south, the same idea was occurring to a group of people in Portobello Road, West London.
It's a kind of thing that occurred to a number of people at the same time who weren't really aware of each other. Because around about this exact time, Kif Kif was creating what we'll euphemistically refer to as F.O. Records in London, which was doing pretty much exactly the same thing, but on a larger scale, really. When we first produced the first cassette, we sent it to a lot of people, and there was a band called the Tronics who had got a copy of our cassette, and they were playing it in the offices of International Times. And Kif Kif was there because he used to do bits of work for them, I think. And he heard this cassette and he's like, well, who's this? And he wrote to us and said, I'm producing these cassette albums and running this cassette label called F.O. Records. And he actually sent me pretty much the whole back catalogue that they had at that time, which was great. It was about 20 cassettes or so came in the post. What really cemented it was one day he rang me completely out of the blue and he said, I'm putting on this gig in London. It's going to be called the Bad Music Festival. It's going to feature a lot of these bands that are on F.O. Records, and we wanted to know if we would play. And we'd never played a gig before, but we thought, well, this is too good an opportunity to miss. But it was at the Acklam Hall in London, which was quite a famous venue back then. A lot of fairly well-known bands played there. Joy Division played there, The Clash played there, Psychedelic Furs played there. Some of the other bands that were on there, the one that the Door and the Window played, obviously. Kif Kif's band, the 012, played also. And Danny and the Dressmakers were another of the bands that played there because they were very big on. They were like the superstars really of F.O Records.
I mean, it was really, experimental type stuff, but that was how we met the Instant Automatons, right? Yeah, because they were kind of doing the same thing in Hull, and we used to do tours with them, and they used to play at all of our gigs, and we used to distribute their things. It was weird, it's like everyone kind of had the same idea at the same time, and it was all part of that sort of post-punk. It was kind of like what the belief of punk rock was, that everything should be free or it should be cheap and it was for everybody. And that's what this whole thing about this DIY stuff and being handwritten, and you didn't have to go to an expensive printer to get things done or anything. Yeah. And it was in a way, I suppose you could say, it's a kind of political statement, right? Yeah,
That was the voice of JB, Jonathan Barnett, who, alongside Kif Kif le Batteur, was co-creator of Fuck Off Records. Merging the energy of punk with the idealism of the free festival movement, they came up with the concept of free music, exchange, community support, and passing around the hat. So you did the gig there, and obviously that must have kind of helped you build some connections in that kind of London scene.
We ended up playing far more gigs down in London and in association with the bands that we met there, bands like Zounds and The Mob and The Astronauts. The scene there was developing at the time. So you had F.O Records, and related to that, there was a studio called Street Level Studios, which was run by Grant Showbiz. And Kif Kif was involved in that as well. We recorded our first EP there, and you had bands like The Fall recording there as well. So that was one landmark. But then I suppose the next one was when we actually made the move into vinyl, which was where we put out our first EP, Peter Paints His Fence, which we recorded at the Street Level Studio. And we distributed that, and Rough Trade took some, and it also got one of the tracks got played on John Peel. So that was like, yeah, we've arrived.
Again, these are the Instant Automatons, and this is on Weird Noise Records, an EP which has been hanging around for a long time, waiting to get played. From it, this is John's Vacuum Cleaner.
I think we were, to some extent, innovators in that. I think we were certainly one of the very few who came up with the idea of sending in a blank cassette, and then we would dub our stuff onto it and then send it back again.
You talked about placing ads in papers, and I got a kick out of the part you said, some of which were refused, but you eventually started to develop a fan base. So can you elaborate on the advertising you did? Where were you advertising?
Or why was it refused?
Yeah.
Well,
I want to know.
So the first album that we did, the Radio Silence, we thought, well, how do we get this? How do we get people to know about this? So we thought, well, I think we both subscribed to the NME at the time. In the back of the NME, there was classified adverts. So we thought, we'll put an ad in there. And we sent the ad off saying, free album, just send a self-addressed envelope and a blank cassette to this address. And they sent it back saying, no, we're not going to print this because you're obviously trying to distribute bootlegs. As we said at the time, I don't really see what kind of a marketing strategy this is, that you're trying to distribute bootlegs of a band that nobody's ever heard of
For nothing.
for free. So how does that work as a business plan? But no, they sort of, first of all, they flatly refused to print them. But then, as the momentum increased, as more bands were producing cassettes, it was becoming more of a accepted thing, and eventually they did.
Instant Automatons from their own EP on Weird Noise Records, as far as I can tell. And that was John Vacuum Cleaner. Now, I've got a letter here from Andy McKinnon, who writes...
When we produced our first cassette album, which was called Radio Silence, we wanted to send copies of it to people and organisations that we particularly admired. So obviously we sent a copy to John Peel. We sent one to Stiff Records because we liked the stuff that they were doing, their output. And they thought that we were sending it as a demo cassette, looking to get signed. And we got a rejection letter from them, which I think, Protag kept that for a long time. I was quite proud of that rejection letter from Stiff Records. So saying that we weren't their kind of thing.
But at this point, were you already kind of thinking, well, we don't want to be your kind of thing?
Yeah, we never thought of signing up to a what you might call a major label, or even a major indie label like Stiff or Chiswick or one of those kind of labels, or Rough Trade even. No, because as I said, I suppose we were a bit like control freaks, really. We did want to keep control of this means of production as much as we could do.
While the Instant Automatons had connected with F.O Records in London and were now regular fixtures on the label's gigs and tours, Deleted Records was keenly releasing albums and compilations and beginning to build their distribution network.
We liked getting tapes from people and them asking us to distribute them for them, but we felt it was a lot better if they could do it themselves, because, it's the whole thing, the whole ethos behind it is do it yourself. The Deleted Bulletin was really just a list of what we had available. We just wanted to produce a list, or a newsletter, saying this is what's available, and then we would send that out. So if somebody sent us a cassette for one of our albums, we would stuff one of these Deleted Bulletins in with it when we sent it back, saying, well, if you're interested in this, you may also be interested in these other things as well. And from out of that grew a thing called Cassette Survival. It was mainly Protag who produced that, and it was basically not just a list of our cassettes that were available, but a list of other people's cassettes as well. And we, as I say, it wasn't exactly like a fanzine, but it was because it was only like a couple of pages or something like that. But we did occasionally include little articles of like how to make your own cassettes, how to distribute your own cassettes. And later on, when we actually produced a couple of vinyl offerings, how to make a record, it was amazing to think that this thing had sort of grown legs and spread out. People did start coming out of the woodwork and saying, oh, you've produced this tape, well, I've produced this tape, have a listen to this. And so there was a lot of then tape trading and intercommunication between these people who'd all, as I said before, they'd all come up with the same idea separately from each other, but now we were coming together. We produced a compilation cassette, which you may have heard of, called Deleted Funtime. Protag conceived the idea, and I sort of went along with it, that we should put this kind of compilation together. Really, I suppose, as a kind of tape version of the Cassette Survival newsletter thing that we used to do. And I think it was kind of like, I suppose, a kind of tape zine or sampler of all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of them were ones who either we went on to distribute ourselves or who went on to be fairly big players in the whole UK DIY cassette scene. So, bands like the Midnight Circus, The Door and the Window, people like Colin Potter. He was a friend of ours. The Digital Dinosaurs. I suppose one of the reasons for doing the Delete Funtime cassette was to try and get people who didn't have such a wide audience out into the public domain or the public eye, as it were.
That's a really generous motivation to have of let's help the other people. And
I think there was this huge thing of cooperation and mutual support and things like that went through the whole of the cassette scene. When we started out, Protag's idea was to number each cassette that we produced. And then we had a card index kind of thing. So somebody would send a request in for a particular cassette. So we would create the cassette, we would stamp it with the number, and then we would write the address and the number of the cassette and the cassette that they'd actually ordered in on this card index. And we managed to keep that up for about a year or so before it just overwhelmed us completely, and we gave up doing that. With cassettes, especially the way that we were doing it, which was basically creating the cassette on demand, it was very difficult to sort of keep a track of how many we'd actually produced.
I love that idea. That's like a supremely kind of nerdy idea of not only making a numbered edition, but noting down who has each copy.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Is Protag was incredibly focused on, the whole administrative procedure and everything. I call myself a control freak, but he was even more of a control freak in those sort of terms. He loved to sort of understand what's going on and where's everything going and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we weren't trained to make these kind of exclusive or anything like that. It was just a way of tracking what went where, or trying to keep a track of what went where. As I said, once the ball started rolling and things got a bit crazy, we had to sort of abandon it.
I don't believe, 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 I don't believe,
Because Protag actually moved down to London. I was still living up in the north all the time that I was in the band because I was working there. Protag did get a job, but he got made redundant. So he decided that his best option was to move to London, and he got very, very heavily involved in that whole West London music scene, Frestonia.
Oh, yeah. So
he built his own PA. So once you've got a PA, everybody wants to be your friend.
Yeah.
So he got very, very much involved in that. He ended up playing guitar with Alternative TV before moving on to playing bass with Blythe Power, which he did for a long time. He was much more involved in that, the whole scene there, and I think it was him who went to Rough Trade and did the deal. The thing that I remember most about it was when we went into the rough trade shop. It was very small, and obviously you had loads of racks of records. But what they would do is they would pin up picture sleeves of various singles on the wall. The wall's absolutely covered with these. And you've got all the big names are up there at the time. Obviously, you had the Sex Pistols, you had the Clash, the Jam, the Adverts, the Ramones, and so on and so forth. And we went in, were there one day, and we had a look, and there was a Peter Paints His Fence cover pinned up on the wall. And we thought, yeah, we have arrived.
During its years of activity from 1978 to 1982, Deleted Records released at least 11 cassettes of music, built a model of collaboration, networking and distribution for independent music. As well as many cassette releases and compilation appearances, the Instant Automatons released 2 EPs and a vinyl album. They'd found their tribe in the West London hippie punks of F.O Records, and we'll hear more about them in a forthcoming episode. In this episode of the Cassette Culture Podcast, you heard me, Martin Franklin, with Jerry Kranitz, Mark Lancaster, Colin Potter, Jonathan Barnett, and of course, John Peel. Music was an excerpt from the duo Electronica on Deleted Funtime, the Instant Automatons' Routine Habit from We Couldn't Agree on a Title, Colin Potter, The Last Train, the Instant Automatons' Scared to Be Alone from Peter Paints His Fence, and Too Big from Not So Deep as a Well, Danny and the Dressmakers' God Puts a Stop to the Silver Paper Monster from their cassette 39 Golden Greats, the Instant Automatons' John's Vacuum Cleaner, played on The John Peel Show, 17th of June 1980 on BBC Radio 1, The Midnight Circus, Prenatal Counselling, Chemical Solutions by the Missing Persons, Disillusion from the Instant Automatons, and Journey to the West by the Mystic Umbrellas, all from the Deleted Funtime compilation.